Now I am pleased to introduce, because of all the pent-up demand, we have two speakers for you today from our alumni ranks. I'm now pleased to introduce another distinguished alumni award recipient who's making a very valuable impact in the world. George Suttles, who received our most recent Distinguished Alumni Award, is the Executive Director of Common Fund Institute, the education and research arm of Common Fund that is designed to partner with and support nonprofit institutional investors. He leads the organization's educational, market research, and professional development activities and is a member of its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. In nominating George for the Alumni Award, our Alumni Association Board of Directors wrote the following. George is a brilliant strategist, problem solver, and thinker. He is committed to systemic change that creates access and opportunities for marginalized populations, even if that means creating new systems, and he always does that in collaboration and community. Before joining Common Fund Institute, George held positions with the John A. Hartford Foundation and U.S. Trust Bank of America. He is on the adjunct faculty of New York University School of Professional Studies and is a member of many nonprofit boards. He earned his master's degree with us, received his undergraduate degree from Wesleyan University, and his Master of Public Administration from Baruch Cooney School of Public Affairs. Please join me in welcoming George Suttles.
So good evening, everyone. A few admissions. I'm nervous, so I'm just going to own that. There's going to be a little sweating that happens, so you'll find me trying to take care of that. Got a couple of mandatory housekeeping things that I need to do, so we'll get past that quickly, and then I'll jump into my speech, which after going after you, Bob, I realize is way too long. So I'll be, freestyling a little bit. So everyone buckle up. Dean Pasek, esteemed faculty, family, friends, and celebrated and decorated graduates, I send you congratulations and gratitude. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. I'm here because I was fortunate enough to receive this year's Distinguished Alumni Award. If I would have known that receiving the award meant I had to speak at commencement, I would have said, no, thank you, I'm good. I'm filled with gratitude to my Lilly family for providing me with the education and support to pursue my passion to serve communities that we all care about. I always tell people that my time here at Lilly and in Indianapolis was a transformational time for me. I made good friends and did good work here. I reflect fondly on my professors and classmates, and a special shout out to Lance Chrisman and the Anthem Foundation family who brought me in as a graduate assistant and never looked back. The Anthem team poured into me, and working with them is still one of the highlights of my professional life. So with that being said, Ashley Souders, if you could raise your hand. Ashley Souders, she here? No? Ashley Souders? Okay, never mind. I'll tell you what I was supposed to do. So I had a chance to meet with Lance and some of the team members from Anthem yesterday. Ashley Souders is the newest member of their team, and Lance insisted that I send my love on their behalf. They're proud of you, Ashley, and they hope you're equal parts gleeful and mortified by me singling you out on Lance's behalf. I know you're new and that COVID has made it hard to be in person with them. So like many of my fun and embarrassing Anthem team stories that I cherish, let this be one of the many stories we will all share together as a team. So, Lance, I did it. This is being recorded. I did it. Let it be known for the record, I did what you asked. What an auspicious occasion. You studied, you wrote all the papers, you did all the tests, you listened to all the lectures, you handed in all the midterms and finals, and now we're here all together to celebrate what you have accomplished. I'd be remiss if I didn't reflect on the fact that you accomplished all of your academic goals in the midst of a global pandemic, a racial reckoning spurred by the senseless murders of Black people by the hands of police, the realization that it may be too late to turn back the damage that has been done by global warming, and arguably we are in one of the most consequential election, legislative, political periods of our time, and amidst all of that, here we are. Amazing. Good times, huh? That was a real, sort of optimistic, pick me up line, right? The fact of the matter is, you come into the world of philanthropy and the broader nonprofit sector at a time where you are needed most. Your hearts and minds are desperately needed in the sector. No matter what it is you choose to focus your efforts on, The tools and resources you have received here at the Lilly School will serve you, and again, communities we all care about well. So thank you for all you have done to get here, and thank you in advance for all that you will do. Here's where I start to freestyle a bit. I'm very close with my younger brother, so when I was thinking about what I was going to say when I was writing this very long speech, well, actually, I wasn't thinking about what I was going to write. I was snacking and scrolling on Instagram. And my brother called me. He's like, "How's the speech going?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's coming along great. Yeah, I'm working real hard on it." And he said, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" I said, I don't know. And he said, "Well, why don't you just share sort of what you've learned in philanthropy and what your perspectives are now? What keeps you up at night? What are you thinking about?" So I said, "Oh, that's actually a good idea, because he's pretty goofy and doesn't have really good ideas all the time, but this one was good. I have to give it to him." The first thing I'll tell you that's been on my mind, the truest, purest expressions of philanthropy can be found closest to you. I'm a New York City native, born and raised. I was raised in the village of Harlem in the 80s and 90s, during a time when drugs and crime ravaged our community. But you know what? I watched neighbors take care of neighbors. I watched a close-knit community take care of each other during challenging times. Everyone was kin. As a matter of fact, I had about 100 cousins, and the funnest part of that was when people would say, "You guys are cousins, but how are you actually related?" And that didn't matter. We were family, we took care of each other, we were neighbors, friends, and community members. My point is, growing up, I experienced philanthropy. And as we know philanthropy now, we think about the titans of philanthropy: Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is, even before I knew those names, I knew some of the greatest philanthropists that I'll ever know. When someone in our community needed something, we provided it. We didn't have much, but we had love, generosity, and compassion that flowed through our neighborhood. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my mother, who, again, is the first philanthropist and the greatest, again, that I've ever known. She raised 3 Black children in Harlem who were successful, thriving, community-minded individuals. She protected and poured into 3 Black babies. And I would argue there is no greater feat than raising Black children in America. No challenge more daunting. She's the greatest philanthropist that I've ever known. I've still got 25 pages of the speech to go. It's not long. I've already pared it down in my mind, and I got it. It's all going to come together. Second thing that I would reflect on, first I shared with you that, the truest, purest forms of philanthropic expression you've already experienced with your families, your neighbors, and your community members. The second thing that I think a lot about is philanthropy can foster forgiveness, understanding, compassion, and healing. I want to share a related story with you. Growing up in Harlem, we had deep community ties and philanthropic expression, but many of my loved ones were impacted negatively by the crack epidemic, including my father. My father, standing at 6'5", was my hero. I'm actually the shortest guy on my dad's side of the family, if you can believe it or not. So the runt of the litter, as my cousins and brothers like to say. He was the bravest, kindest man I've ever met. One of the hardest working people I've ever known. But after he lost his job delivering payroll, and he lost his identity as a provider of the family, he went into a downward spiral and succumbed to drug addiction. We fought to keep him tethered to the family, but we ultimately failed. Until he passed away in 2009 from a respiratory illness that was caused and exacerbated by his addiction. I struggled watching him grapple with that addiction. I resented him. I hated him. I thought he had given up on us. Whew. Sorry, y'all, just give me 1 minute. It wasn't until years later that I had an opportunity to gain a different perspective. I joined my first nonprofit board in 2013, Odyssey House. Odyssey House is a nonprofit organization in New York City that offers residential and outpatient mental health and substance abuse treatment programs to individuals and families. During my time on the board of Odyssey House, I have learned that addiction is not a choice. It's a sickness that impacts millions across the country, regardless of race, creed, color, socioeconomic status, or gender orientation. One story in particular stands out to me. I have earmarked some of my philanthropic gifts to Odyssey House to support Black fathers trying to grapple with addiction and reconnect with their families. One of the administrators of the program asked me to come and visit with these Black fathers who I had helped support. And when I visited with them, just like my uncles do now, they teased me for having on a suit. Who do we think you are? You look like Barack Obama with those ears. Et cetera, et cetera. But as I sat there with them, listening to their stories, one man in particular started crying, and he said, I know my addiction has hurt my family. I just want to go home to them. And through my service to Odyssey House, my ability to devote my time, talent, and treasure to the mission of the organization, I gained something invaluable, the ability to understand my father and forgive him. The next thing that I would share with you is philanthropy is to be celebrated and interrogated. So I have to admit, this part of the speech either will be like top 10 all-time commencement speeches at the Lilly School, or they'll never ask me to come back again. So we'll see. Philanthropy is a particularly American institution, as we've talked about: Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Ford, Buffett, Gates. These are the names that we think about when we think about philanthropy. And granted, philanthropy has spurred innovation, unlocked opportunities for many, and shaped American life for the last 20 plus years. As a matter of fact, we all stand tall in our caps and gowns, graduates of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. We ourselves, our institution, is a philanthropic gift that has enriched us all. I personally have benefited from many philanthropic efforts, whether they were efforts to provide opportunities to low-income students to access high-quality education, or philanthropic efforts around youth development sports programs. So I am grateful for the philanthropic efforts that those who've come before me have put in place so that I could thrive and be successful. But as you sort of receive that gift and that blessing, it begins to sharpen another lens through which you can look at philanthropy more critically. So through the Oliver Scholars Program, an academic enrichment program that recruits Black and brown students from NYC public schools and gives them opportunities to prepare and to apply and enroll at Ivy League preparatory boarding and day schools, I began to understand what the meaning of social inequity was. When I enrolled at Dalton in 1995, there were pristine buildings, small classes, we had access to technology, the cafeteria food was delightful, so good. And I felt blessed and privileged to be there. But then I looked around and I said, why? How come I get access to these opportunities and all of my childhood friends were going to New York City public schools, were in overcrowded classes, with exhausted teachers, with very limited resources? Why? Philanthropy gave me this opportunity, but why couldn't we stay in our neighborhood and go to a grade school? Why did it take a philanthropic gift to lift me out? What were the systems in place creating this inequality? I took that understanding of privilege, philanthropy, and broken systems to college with me, where I further sharpened my lens. I did a ton of student organizing. One time the school president pulled me aside and said, hey, listen, stop. But I understood the importance of organizing for what was right and building community power. After I graduated from Wesleyan, I started my career in direct service, working in New York City public schools. And we did good work there. We helped a lot of people. But I understood that the barriers to high quality education for these New York City public schools were systemic yet again. And so how could I elevate my perch and understand how to fix some of those systems? So then I took a job at the National Urban League. We were doing technology programs and policy, helping low-income communities across the country in partnership with affiliate networks, prepare low-income individuals and their families for 21st century digital jobs. We also, from a policy standpoint, did work to bridge the digital divide, working with the FCC and other corporate partners to expand universal broadband and then universal Wi-Fi mandates. Good work, but again, the systems were broken. All right, hold on, y'all. This is where we start freestyling now. Hold on. I got you. Then I got into grant making, quite randomly, actually. Everyone always asks me, how do I get into philanthropy? How do I get into grant making? And I go, I don't know. And that is a less than satisfactory answer for most. But my first foray into grant making was at the New York State Health Foundation, where I was a program officer that worked on clinical and community partnership programs. And again, we did a lot of great work, but I always wondered, why is philanthropy taking care of this when we should be looking at progressive tax reform, for example, or we should be looking at Medicaid expansion? This isn't something that philanthropy should be tackling. This is something that as a citizenry, as a civil society, we should be tackling to take care of each other. As I mentioned, my time at Anthem was transformative, but at the height of the Affordable Care Act implementation, I began to realize that the real solutions were never about more healthcare philanthropy, more grants, more dollars out the door. It was about fixing broken systems that disincentivized healthcare providers and insurance companies to actually care for people. The real solution wasn't the next grant to IU Health or some community-based nonprofit. Sorry to call out IU. It was transforming the healthcare system to build insurance companies accountable for positive health outcomes so that they design benefits that provide access to affordable, high-quality healthcare. I continued to do this work as a philanthropic advisor at U.S. Trust Bank of America, working with high net and ultra high net worth individuals and their families, helping them think about philanthropic strategy. For the graduates, this is also a good through line because there are actually jobs in philanthropy. My mom was curious about that. She's like, you're gonna go do what? And then work where? How's that gonna work? So just take it from me. They're jobs. They're jobs in philanthropy. Don't worry about it. I worked with these families, and again, we did good work, but I began to understand that there was white supremacy and paternalism flowing through conversations that we were having about taking care of communities. Some of my clients didn't want to partner with communities. They wanted to dictate and hold the money over their heads so that they could influence how they were taking care of themselves. At Common Fund, in my current role, I'm the head of Common Fund Institute, the education and research arm of Common Fund. Fun fact, Common Fund was founded by the Ford Foundation in 1971 to help struggling college and university endowments become more savvy long-term institutional investors. So we're an asset management firm, so we look to grow endowments, but we also work with fundraisers to do endowment building strategies. I remember one time I was speaking to a senior administrator of a small college in the South, and I asked him who his constituencies were and how he thought about philanthropy in the context of the work that he was doing. And in confidence, well, I guess I didn't say his name, but I think I should say what he said, but I will. In confidence, he said, students pay tuition, donors pay the bills. During COVID, I did a lot of work in the private community foundation space to help these orgs think about increasing payout strategies well above the IRS minimum 5%. Many foundation leaders were nervous to spend more. What about future generations who will need access to these resources? What about the rainy day we have all been preparing for? I said, well, my friends, we are in the middle of a monsoon, tsunami, and hurricane. It's not just raining, it's pouring. What are the implications of philanthropy fighting against many of the complex social issues that capitalism has caused? How can philanthropy espouse love when its parent, capitalism, extracts without regard for human life? Are we stewards of missions or stewards of donor feelings, desires, and satisfactions? Who are we accountable to and why? Here's what I know to be true. Philanthropy, the philanthropic nonprofit sector, saves lives and generates social impact for tens of millions of people across the world. It connects people to their passions and serves as conduits for you and me to express our values. Philanthropy connects us to each other. It is the backbone of civil society, and it is what makes the study of and the participation in this dynamic sector so fulfilling. But here's what I also know. Philanthropy isn't perfect, like any institution built by humans, and it must be interrogated. Philanthropy is a byproduct of extractive capitalism and white supremacy that throughout its history has enslaved, indentured, displaced, and erased African, indigenous, and persons of color in their communities. For example, in the 1930s and 40s, Carnegie Foundation funded the Carnegie Institute of Washington, a research institute that was in the Carnegie Corporation portfolio to foster innovative research practice. Unfortunately, in the 30s and 40s, one of those innovations was eugenics. If you're unfamiliar, eugenics is the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. Eugenics was increasingly discredited as unscientific and racially biased during the 20th century, especially after the adoption of its doctrines by the Nazis in order to justify their treatment of Jews, disabled people, and other minority groups. Philanthropic practice is a tool, and its best practices are subjective to those who have access to them. Sometimes the common practice isn't the best one. Another story I read recently was about Harvard. So, and this one I'm going to do this because I was like confused, and so it's more real time. So you're going to see me sort of be like invoke the spirit of my black auntie. Harvard recently announced that after an extensive years-long initiative to uncover the truth about Harvard's ties to American slavery, Harvard President Larry Bacow released the report from the Committee on Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery, and committed $1 million to fund the implementation of the committee's recommendations. Harvard currently has a $40+ billion endowment. It's one of the most prestigious schools in the world, and they discovered that on the backs of slaves, the business school and the law school were built. Do we really think $100 million is the answer? 250 million? What number will restore and heal centuries of chattel slavery and the impact Harvard's participation has had on generations of African American families? Now you may be saying to yourself, I thought you loved philanthropy. What's going on here? I do. I love philanthropy. But I find myself lately asking, instead of focusing on the transformational power of philanthropy, what about focusing on dynamic public sector systems that take care of the citizenry and provide a true safety net for everyone? What about access to high quality healthcare, education, housing, and healthy food as a public good, a right, and not the next philanthropic effort of a foundation? These things cannot be achieved by philanthropy and the nonprofit sector alone, and as the sector is currently organized. We must understand not only how philanthropy can help, but again, interrogate, explore, and ask what are the real radical transformations that need to occur in order to realize the change we all want to see. At its very best, philanthropy is creative and aspirational. But the reality is philanthropy, as currently understood, is a band-aid. So as much as we celebrate, study, and laud philanthropy and its practitioners, we must keep that same energy and interrogate, question, and imagine what the world would look like if philanthropy was right-sized. Maybe, for example, to truly foster innovation while progressive tax reform allowed us to take care of each other. What if we made capitalism more inclusive? Or explored alternative economic systems that allowed everyone to access sustainable living wage jobs with career trajectories? What if we did that instead of advocating for public policy that continues to protect the rich's right to be philanthropic while exacerbating the wealth gap between the 1% and the rest of us? How come Black and people of color-led nonprofits are chronically underfunded, even though many of those organizations are led by those who are directly impacted and closest to solutions? If private and institutional donors are so worried about return on investment, impact, efficiency, et cetera, why aren't dollars overflowing to Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led grassroots nonprofits, to community organizing groups? This trend begs the question, does philanthropy really care about social impact? And what about the professionalization of the nonprofit sector? I would argue that the professionalization of the philanthropic sector is diluting the real essence of philanthropy, similar to how one could argue that consumerism and shallow materialism dilutes and confuses the real essence of Christmas and the holiday season. Again, at its best, philanthropy connects people and communities to causes they care about, and at its most transactional, it distracts us from making deep, meaningful, messy, beautiful connections with real humans who are grappling with complex personal, social, and systemic issues that impact us all. Philanthropy gives us permission to avoid the deeper, more radical transformation we all deserve. What about reparative frameworks that not only acknowledge harm, but look to heal and restore? A grant agreement doesn't tell the whole truth. A gift acceptance policy doesn't outline the real opportunities. The fundraising textbook doesn't focus on the people closest to the solution. And again, yet I love philanthropy and believe in its power, and I will both celebrate, practice, and interrogate it with my whole heart. And finally, I promise we're almost done, the essence of philanthropy is love. Don't forget that. Always remember that it is the love of mankind that will bring us closer to our collective humanity. Not impact reports or donor thank you letters. Don't let this degree or the professionalization of the nonprofit sector distract you from the essence of philanthropy. When in doubt, seek out and tap into your love for yourself and for each other. And I promise you, when you're tired, it will revive you in your work. If we remember love and lean into it, then compassion, grace, forgiveness, healing, restoration, repair, and justice will prevail. Philanthropy is not a destination, but a bridge, allowing us to achieve all these goals and connect more closely as human beings. As you move on from here and continue to pursue your professional and academic paths, always remember to see who's in the room, then look again and recognize who's missing. Identify them and call them in. If it's your voice that is missing, yell and scream, demand to be heard. I want you to always keep and use your imagination. Pursue the type of philanthropic practice that will lead to our shared freedom. The type of love, that good love. I'm about to be on my R&B, that good love. The type of love where the existence of other humans is inseparable from your own. And you fight tooth and nail to ensure their safety and their rights to full lives. That is what love is. That is what philanthropy is. This isn't a political statement or a moral imperative. I'm not sharing what we ought to do. I'm using my imagination and sharing with you what I think we're capable of. So as we celebrate this momentous occasion, remember to let your professional path be propelled by love. You are part of a special group that has dedicated itself to the pursuit of philanthropic study and practice. No one can take that away from you. It is an honor, and you have earned it. Celebrate philanthropy and also interrogate it. Think of this accountability as a love offering in and of itself. We don't examine things we don't care deeply about. Except for like trash TV, like keeping up with the Kardashians and stuff, I'm very invested in that, but I don't care deeply about it. Question everything, get the fancy job, for sure do that. But always remember to do the real work. Always remember that every single one of us, every human being is capable of giving and receiving love. We are all philanthropists. In closing, thank you for the honor and the opportunity to be here with you today. I love you all. We're all here to support you, your friends, loved ones, and your Lilly family. We are all here. We can't wait to see what you do. We know it's going to be amazing. Congratulations again.